Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey everyone.
Hello, everyone. Let's just give it another couple of minutes for people to join. So welcome everybody to the Best Practices Special Interest Group. I see we have lots of new faces with us today, so thank you very much everyone for joining. It's probably a good idea if we start with just a quick introduction to what we're trying to do here, and then it might be worth us just doing a quick round of introductions for people who are new on the call. So I'm Terry, and I co-chair the special interest group with Tara, who's just joined us. And our focus really is on communicating all things continuous delivery and helping to capture an overview of significant information in the space, to try and provide a repository of information where people can go to learn more and to understand what things are important, what things you might need to watch out for, and which things you should be very careful to avoid. So we maintain a website which contains both the best practices narrative and also the reference architecture that we're working on at the moment. So Tara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Tara Hernandez. I'm VP of Engineering at MongoDB, specializing in developer productivity. As Terry indicated, partner in crime when we nerd out about the academic elements of continuous delivery. Should we popcorn? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, sorry. Fatih, would you like to just do a quick intro and then pass it around to the next person in line?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Fatih Demirci. Welcome everyone. I work at the Linux Foundation, leading the Continuous Delivery Foundation, and very interested in upcoming conversation about collaboration, potential collaboration between the CDF and Open Mainframe. Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'll go next. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Bauer. I'm product manager working at Broadcom. Particularly, I work on our Endeavor product. Endeavor is the leading software change management system for mainframe. But I also have a lot of experience in the Open Mainframe project, working on projects such as Zoe. I was a squad lead for the Zoe command line interface, which allows you to interact with the platform from off-platform technologies for a number of years, and also involved in the COBOL programming course underneath that same foundation. And then Peter, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was going to say I was going to wait for my name to be called, but I'll jump in too. Thanks, Mike. Peter Wassell, I work for Broadcom as well. Mike is on my team. My role within Broadcom is leading the work that we do in the product space to define a set of solutions that we call mainframe DevOps, which consists of solutions that could involve continuous delivery, the adaptation of tools in the open space to the mainframe and so forth. I'm also a member of the Open Mainframe Governing Board, working closely with John Murtick. Do I get to call the next one? I'm going with Yvonne Claire. How about?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Claire. I'm a DevOps engineer for Shisha Wancha, and Luis is going to talk next. We're the DevOps engineers that worked for Wancha's Z. So we call it Wancha on Z. So making Wancha to work on mainframe. And we got an email about this meeting, so we came to see how we can contribute or collaborate. Luis.
Hi, I'm Luis Tovar, senior developers. As Ivan said, we work to migrate Rancher and other products from SUSE to S390X. So happy to be here.
Welcome. Okay. Fatih, it looks like you dropped a couple of suggestions into the agenda.
Yeah. So maybe I can summarize why I put them. John and I had a few conversations past couple of weeks to see like what are the opportunities between Continuous Foundation and Open Mainframe commit to have like explore. And based on those discussions, I just added a few topics there. It's like, okay, what is the continuous best practices our community has been developing about? Maybe Tara, Terry, you can summarize that and maybe highlight a few things about that work, which is like collaboratively developed knowledge source. And then maybe we can learn what Open Mainframe project is about. And then have a conversation around the applicability of the continuous best practice to mainframes and any other relevant topic when it comes to continuous for mainframes, and continuing to talk about like what kind of opportunities we have to collaborate. So again, these are just a few talking points, and if any other topic comes up, yes, we can talk about them as well. So that was.
So let me explain a little bit about what we've been doing and then how things might fit together. So we've noticed that there's a fairly big challenge with continuous delivery because it's such a broad scope of topic. So many people come to continuous delivery from an engineering perspective within an organization that's already adopted that as a methodology. And so a lot of the visible focus and the discussions that you see in general are about the engineering discipline and CI/CD and best practices in build pipelines, things like that. All of which is extremely important, but also only part of the overall picture, because for continuous delivery to work for an organization, it has to be fundamentally a business methodology, because you need to have all of your teams structured in such a way that you can support that style of delivery. And this is a major sticking point for a lot of organizations, that they try to implement purely inside an engineering department, and then get a really effective system that can deliver product that's ready for deployment, but then it hits a barrier because the rest of the business is only working on a 6-week or a 6-month cadence to make the decisions to allow you to actually go live with that product. So what we've tried to do with the best practices resources are to provide the overarching picture of how all of these problems break down into different areas. And so you'll see that on the website, there's a lot of discussion of commercial practice and how to structure your business in order to do continuous delivery. And then we drill down into each of the engineering sections and talk about individual aspects of testing and deployment and how those things add up to give us an overarching practice. And then what we also provide within that set of resources is an area for individual teams and projects to publish white papers on their specialist technology or their area of interest. So the main repository we try and keep as technology agnostic as possible, and then we provide an embedded area that allows for much deeper dives on how you might implement a continuous delivery practice with a particular tool set or a particular technology. So I would be very interested to understand what some of the challenges are from a mainframe perspective, and then how we might be able to facilitate somewhere to capture that and further the discussion about what best practice is in that area and how to disseminate that information.
Terry, do you want to jump into that now, or did you want to cue that for a later discussion?
Well, I think at this stage, it would be good for us to just have a broad discussion about where we think things are at the moment, what level of maturity is there in the mainframe space, what challenges are there, what can we do that would help to improve things. Okay.
I guess I'll start, and Michael or John Murtick or whomever can chime in as we go. The big market share or solution that's in the mainframe market today for solving the challenges around what would be called continuous integration or continuous delivery on the mainframe, as distinct from applications that include the mainframe, is a product called Endeavor. Now, we in Broadcom are biased towards Endeavor because it's our product, but in fact, it does have a largest market share, right? And a number of mainframe clients over the last several decades have come to rely upon it, have come to invest in it for creating builds, packages, and deployment for software artifacts on the mainframe. So far, so good.
Yep.
One of the big challenges that we see with our mainframe clients is, well, a couple things. As mainframe, or as the enterprise looks to endeavor continuous delivery outside of the mainframe, there's sort of an organizational difference alignment within the corporation, as well as a cultural difference in mindset between those folks in distributed and cloud-based worlds who just gravitate towards continuous delivery naturally and the tooling that goes with it, and viewing the mainframe as something distinct and different, and not really knowing how to have that conversation with the mainframe team. So that's a challenge. Within Broadcom for sure, and I know John within Open Mainframe Project for sure, we're promoting some thinking which says the mainframe should be viewed as just another platform, right? And insofar as solving the end-to-end challenges, you can include the mainframe in your continuous delivery, your agile development practices, your overall SDLC, because what we have done in Open Mainframe Project is work towards making the experience in working with the mainframe like the experience in working on distributed and cloud environments, right? So for example, when it comes to automating processes on the mainframe, perhaps from off host or perhaps integrating tooling that's off host, we have something called the Zoe CLI, right? Which interfaces with mainframe resources. Mike could go into detail, he led the squad, but gives a CLI-based user experience that can be used to automate tasks and access to resources and data on the mainframe, right? Trying to think where to go next with this. Mike, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I can just add a few points. So historically, automation on platform on the mainframe has been done through either jobs and JCL or Rex is the scripting language on the platform. But what has happened over the last so many years is there's been an emergence of a bunch of different APIs on the platform, making the platform accessible and integratable with all the tools we use for distributed development. And then Zoe offers two important pieces on top of those APIs becoming available. One's an API mediation layer to standardize access to those APIs. And the other one is, as Peter mentioned, the command line interface, which allows me, just like if I was using, the AWS CLI to automate things against AWS, I can use the Zoe CLI to automate things against the mainframe, just another platform I'm interacting with. And the Zoe CLI also has it's integratable, so different vendors can plug in their products into it and offer extensions, and then extend access from all these distributed tools to the mainframe, for example. Now it's just also promoting a lot of the visibility into this, because I think just generally in the distributed world, folks aren't necessarily aware or have the conversations around including mainframe in these processes. But yeah, using Jenkins to automate processes on mainframe, definitely possible. Using popular IDEs for development like Visual Studio Code's possible. And that's really what I view the Open Mainframe Project is about, is extending the ability to work with mainframe from the same tools and technologies you would use for distributed or cloud development.
So one thing that's probably worth mentioning here is we have a sibling project called CD Events, and that project is focused on trying to come up with a technology agnostic vocabulary for continuous delivery events, so that we can solve exactly these sorts of problems where you need to have a mixed technology stack, but you would like to have some sort of overarching continuous delivery automation process. So CD Events is hoping to provide a way in which you can integrate different tools with a common language, so that you can have a shared perspective about what's happening in different types of your parts of your pipelines, and what events are going on that may influence the behavior of segments of your pipelines.
I think that makes sense. What we have found, I'm sure you all share this view, is that DevOps environments, continuous delivery pipelines are multi-tool, multi-vendor by definition. And the part that's missing is the part you're speaking about, which is, sure, but how do we all speak about them so that we're sort of on the same page, right? And yes, we would want, on behalf of Open Mainframe Project, we would want the mainframe to be part of that, because like we said, it should be no different.
So this is fascinating because one, the first thing that you said, Peter, was around sort of organizational adoption or adaptability, if you will. I mean, so in some ways, it really doesn't matter the runtime environment. We're always going to have this tension about why are we investing all of this effort in order to do this thing, right? What's the business proposition? Which is always Terry's, big fight that he takes. Like, no, there's so much business value here. The other thing is that within MongoDB, so I joined a little less than a year ago, and this is the first time since I was in college back in the 90s that I've been involved with mainframes again, because you can run MongoDB on Z series and PowerPC mainframes. And so, I'm looking as the VP that oversees the dev infrastructure, like, how do we integrate this effectively? And there's a similar challenge, I think, when you think about like Mac Stadium, right? I mean, AWS most recently is starting to offer Mac hosting within their environment, but for a long time that wasn't the case, and it's still kind of on the fence whether or not that's a good value add. But it's that concept that we have at MongoDB around dynamic versus static hosting. I think that the industry has forgotten that there is more than just Linux x86 or maybe Linux and Windows x86 as a default platform, when, I forget who said it, there is a huge market for mainframe consumption on-prem, not cloud hosted, and it's not likely to change given the customers that are likely in that space, government agencies, financials, where there are frankly laws on where you can store data and where you can run compute. So I do think there's a pretty critical opportunity from a business vertical perspective to kind of drill into this with even more concrete examples in this space.
Yeah, I'd like to yes and what you said. Our view, at least in Broadcom, is that the mainframe should be. It's one of these right workload for the platform sort of thoughts. We don't believe all workloads should be on the mainframe. There are certain people who believe all the workload should be on the mainframe. You should do all your new development on the mainframe. Our point of view is like, look, there are certain workloads that are optimized, or that the mainframe optimizes, scales, secures, etc. But there's a certain amount of work that rightfully should be done, hosted and done off the mainframe. And that hybrid notion really sets up for what we talked about earlier, which is, well, if that's the case, you got to get these two worlds to work together, right? And that's sort of the value prop, or the problem statement, I should say, in where you were going, I think. So,
first of all, if someone could drop a good link for Endeavor, if or I found the open mainframe site. I don't know if Endeavor is.
Google
there it is. There it is. Found it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to listen and type and Google at the same time.
That's okay. We're looking you all up on LinkedIn as we go here, just to see who's.
So one of the things that I think has been very prevalent that I think about in the continuous delivery conversation is how tightly coupled not only to Linux x86 but also containers, right? So even if you look at the CDF offerings, right, that Jenkins is the old workhorse. It's been around for a million years. You can kind of do whatever for good or ill, right? But then Tecton, Jenkins X, Spinnaker to a certain degree, it's a really hardcore focus on containerization and container orchestration, and a lot of the industry is really pushing hard in that direction. Now, I happen to know there are people, Elizabeth, oh God, what is her last name? Anyway, IBM mainframe nerd, is talking about running Kubernetes orchestration on mainframes, but it's sort of it's more of like an interesting sideline rather than from what I can tell, a hardcore business investment. Now, I'm curious what your take is on that and where. Nope, it starts with a J. I can look her up later.
Elizabeth Joseph.
Yes, thank you. Has cute babies. She keeps posting all over social media. I'm curious to. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you want the inside scoop or what we're allowed to talk about scoop?
Well, you don't have to give details because we don't want to violate NDAs, but where do you see this going? Like, do you see that actually building momentum, or do you see that is kind of distracting from maybe more critical issues from the perspective of continuous delivery? Because a lot of people will start conflating them, and they're not the same thing. And by conflating, I mean continuous delivery, sort of future looking, and containerization as the one true way.
Yeah, see, that's what I was going to react to first, is this idea that, my point of view, having done multiple variations or stepping up to multiple variations of this problem in different roles, is that implementing a continuous delivery pipeline does not mean you have to adopt containers.
Right.
It is my first point of view, right? And in fact, when you look at the kinds of things that some of our more advanced mainframe clients are doing to bring together the enterprise and the mainframe worlds and develop, a true developer platform that's self-serve and allows their developers to spin up instances or gain access to mainframe resources, whatever their job is, right? That's all meant to try to normalize using the constructs that are available on the platform, right? So that doesn't mean like you got to do containers on the mainframe to make that developer platform work. And in fact, the clients that I'm referring to, they haven't implemented it that way. They just acknowledge the fact that the mainframe, offers the resources that it offers, and they needed to find a way to interface with them so that the mainframe could be included in their developer platform that they made available to their developers. So that's my first thought. Second would be that IBM is certainly heading in the direction of placing a big bet on Kubernetes. I know that for a fact because I was part of that in one of my prior roles in leading the engineering team at IBM Cloud to build out the Kubernetes service on the IBM Cloud platform. That
I don't think that's a secret. There's a lot of people talking about it.
Right. Well, it also led to the acquisition of Red Hat, which was further instantiation because, the Red Hat everywhere strategy says, you need a Kubernetes abstraction layer. We got it. It's called Red Hat OpenShift. It happens to run everywhere you would want it to run, including on-prem, go, right? So that being the case, I think what you're seeing as far as the Z platform is concerned is, yeah, us too, right? So you saw that initially with making a Red Hat hosted Red Hat OpenShift available on Systems E Linux, right? And what you're seeing lately is, and this may be where Elizabeth is coming from, using parts of the Kubernetes technology stack to make it possible to orchestrate containers on ZOS, right? That starts to get into some really gnarly issues though, right? Because the mainframe at that layer has been optimized like crazy over many decades to run workload very efficiently in an isolated way. So you sort of scratch your head and say, well, why are they messing with that, right? Or are they? Or is the idea that they simply want to make it possible to run containers in an orchestrated way on ZOS, which I'm not sure who's doing that right now, or even would want to do that. Just because the workloads that are already running in that environment are highly optimized, don't touch them, right? So I'm just riffing a little bit, but did that help, Tara?
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting because if you so one of the challenges, and actually one of the areas where we have gaps, and Terry, please feel free to jump in anytime here, is around best practices around security and compliance as it pertains to lifecycle, right, and continuous delivery. So when you have a whole industry, you look at SIG Store and the companies around that, and then there's a new one coming out now. I think Microsoft has a thing that they're trying to do. And again, all of that is based on containers, and all the interpretation around the executive order and SBOMs and provenance, it's all around the container, right, and the tooling. But even outside of mainframes, container adoption versus VMs, for example, is still not in the majority, right? And then if you add customer use of mainframes on top of that, I think there's an even bigger gap. And
so hold that thought though, because we're doing a piece of work that we maybe will help enlighten a little bit around how mainframe, Endeavor, SBOM, and the world you're describing come together.
Okay. So that's going to be like, how do we develop the ecosystems that aren't container to fill in those gaps? Sorry, Terry,
so
were you going to say?
No, I was going to ask Mike to speak a little bit about the SBOM support that we're adding to Endeavor.
Yeah, so to be in general, I mean, I think the executive order was more than just focused on containers, right? It was about providing software bills of material for all software and an attestation.
Oh, agree. I just mean, where are the tools in being invested? It's all around the containers.
Okay. Oh, right. But then we look at like there's SBOM support on the distributed side for generating these SBOMs. And what we're looking at introducing into the mainframe space is the ability to generate SBOMs for mainframe artifacts. So any mainframe sort of file or project and endeavor or package that you're looking to deliver will come with an SBOM, because that's sort of where we see the, the future of the space going, is that for any software delivered, customers will come to expect that assigned SBOM comes alongside of it. And then I'm not sure exactly the technology related to containers, but some of the integration points we're looking at are tools like the open tools like dependency track, where if they get an SBOM from a mainframe application or an SBOM from a distributed application or whatever, they can load that into that tool and then be notified of where the vulnerabilities on their system exist, and really just integrating, into all those tools that can read and analyze SBOMs to give customers better views of their environments.
So yeah, I think this is all really important to the overarching process, and as Tara's already said, it's usually my role to drag people back up from the technology there and say,
yes, it is.
Actually, this is an asset management problem that, you've got customers out there who are building products, and those products depend on multiple technologies. And what they really need to be able to do is maintain their product as a contiguous asset where they know what state it's in at any time, regardless of what parts of technology are involved in building that. And so from that perspective, the mainframe problem is not a unique one. It's a class of examples like AI and machine learning, high performance computing, where you've got specialist architectures for doing a certain thing more effectively, and those specialist architectures get treated differently. And so what we want to really focus on is having the ability to span the continuous delivery ethos across all of those technology spaces, regardless of what actual technology is going on, not force them to all align to one technical implementation, but instead provide the appropriate abstractions so that they can be integrated into this overarching asset management structure that lets you deliver with confidence. And so anyway, you've got a process that's automated until the point where you have to send a written memo to a guy in the basement who hacks up some code and then manually uploads it onto a machine somewhere. It's those bits we need to dig into now and wrap those and protect them.
Oh, hopefully that's not your view of the mainframe, Terry.
It's not, but it's certainly something that you see a lot in people's general processes. One of the things that's often challenging is that for people who are working within the industry on large industry products, they're already a long way the way there with best practice in product development, and they live in this ecosystem that is surrounded by all of these good techniques and good things to do. But then when you move out to the customer end of things, you've got people building, equally large real world applications that are reliant on products from multiple providers, but they're not exposed in the same way to this in-depth culture of continuous delivery and DevOps and things like that. And so, it is not unusual at all to find mission critical applications still running on an Excel spreadsheet on a server under somebody's desk. It's all of this stuff is still out there. It's still like the 1990s in many ways, in many places.
For sure. 100%
it's a
agree.
big step to take people from there to, iterating 4 orders of magnitude faster than they are currently.
I'm
So-
curious. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if we could double click on that for a second, because I suppose I've had the luxury of leading engineering teams throughout my career who were of the mind, I want to write code, I want to automate, I want to, I don't want to do anything manual, and they gravitate away from the situation you were describing. Why isn't everyone like that?
I think there's a cultural challenge, which is that these techniques propagate through exposure to them. So, if you're working in the Bay Area, you're going to get exposed to all of those ideas all of the time from multiple directions.
Right.
And also people are moving around between companies and taking those cultural ideas with them. So you get this wonderful ecosystem that's propagating best known methods within the ecosystem.
Mhm.
But once you move out of hotspots like that, you've got still large companies, but they tend to be geographically isolated. There's not so much freedom of movement, and so people will grow up in an industry, and they may only work in banking, or they may only work in insurance.
Mhm.
So they have a very in-depth knowledge of the history of how to do things going back to the 60s and 70s in that area, but very limited exposure to alternative models of the world.
I mean,
which is a big part of why we exist, and what we're trying to do with best practices is to disseminate that information so that more people get exposed to it and can potentially benefit.
Right.
So even in the Bay Area, though, because I like to have my counterexample. I mean, I worked at a company where I would get into arguments with another VP of engineering who would say things to me like, why should my developers waste time writing tests they haven't finished implementing yet? And by the way, that's how we did it at my last company, right? Or what was the other good one? It's too difficult to try to ship stable artifacts more than once a quarter. So this was as recently as 2017. I left that company soon after, and then I heard he left and went to Amazon. So God help them. But I also think it's the type of business that you're in. I think I think B2C folks, perhaps, to make some broad generalizations, might not have the same strength of culture because they don't have the compliance or SLAs or other types of things. This is gaming industry in this particular case. It's I do think there are kind of these cultural pockets where we have wildly divergent cultures. So how do we smooth that out a little bit better, particularly as the industries themselves start to merge, right? The gaming industry now has financial elements, right? Unity has their whole platform, for example, around monetization, which is introducing things that previously were not necessarily a part of the game development ecosystem in the same way. I'm curious. I guess this is for Peter and Michael in particular. Where you're talking about, Endeavor being a platform for mainframes, but there's a lot of element of sort of bridging the gap between mainframes and broader. So I'm curious, what are kind of the key bridging needs that you're seeing in that process? Is it incorporating certain types of third-party software solutions? Is it middleware type of things? What are the main bridging challenges you're seeing? Because I'm wondering if that's maybe where the best collaboration opportunities might be.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's probably 2 answers to that. Well, there may be more, but one example would be a feature that we ship as part of Endeavor that we call the bridge forget capability.
Bridge forget?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can imagine what it does, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's basically a synchronization solution which would allow somebody to prime a Git repo with a code that was previously under SCM control in Endeavor, and then give those who prefer the Git interface or the Git experience to operate on that code as if it were on the mainframe. And then the solution takes care of synchronizing back and forth. So that's one example where what we're trying to do there is continue to make Endeavor relevant to emerging technology trends. You could say, well, look, dude, Git's been out there forever, but emerging technology trends that mainframe teams are running into and finding that younger generations of folks that they hire prefer, right? So that's one example. Another example, although it may not align completely with what you were getting at, is we've spent a considerable amount of investment producing a set of Visual Studio Code extensions that leverage things like the LSP that's already in VS Code to understand code or languages like COBOL that run on the mainframe, but that would allow application developers to continue to use VS Code even when they want to operate on mainframe code, application code that runs on the mainframe. I think the last example would be, at least in Broadcom, and certainly this is facilitated by the Open Mainframe project and the work that all of us have been doing at Zoe, is making it possible to adapt tooling that runs in other environments against the mainframe. For example, we have a solution which allows you to leverage test frameworks like Mocha Jest, but operate in or run test case or cause the running of test cases and then the validation of results on the mainframe and bring that all back to the test framework running off the mainframe. Mike, do you have any other examples or thoughts on that? And Tara,
Yeah.
does this go in the direction where you were, where your head was at?
I was just curious. This is exactly the kinds of things I was wondering about.
Okay, you
Yeah.
shook your head. I'm wondering if that was, no, that's not what I meant.
No, sorry. This was like me frantically trying to take the notes.
Oh, got it. Good, Mike.
Yeah, I would just add, just really any off-platform tool, or especially in cases of scripting, there's a lot of power out there in terms of the open source libraries that can be leveraged and now applied. A big thing around testing frameworks is there isn't much in terms of native testing frameworks on the mainframe. Like you'd have to build out your own custom assertions. So like the value you get by integrating with those testing frameworks and having assertion libraries, it's a huge amount, because you can imagine developing distributed applications where you had to test without a testing framework or assertion library, right? It's a lot of manual effort. So just wanted to highlight that. The other piece I like to think about it in terms of is like if we look at what Microsoft's doing with GitHub, right? They originally were just source control management, but now they're looking at going into the code editing space with code spaces. They're looking at going into the CI space with GitHub Actions. They're looking at going into the artifact repository housing, which obviously is not as full-blown a solution as something like Artifactory, but they have GitHub releases, right? So I'd say like if you could reverse that and think back to when Endeavor was created, it was first created to solve all those problems, and it does every step of that. But now we're looking at allowing it to be more integratable into using the tools of choice. So if there's a particular piece you want to plug into Endeavor, like use GitHub for the source control management, or maybe you want to use Jenkins for your continuous integration pipeline or what have you, you can plug into each one of those sections of Endeavor. And for places where you don't want to take risk of changing, you can continue using what you have been using for the past so many years.
It makes me think about a system back in the battle days that tried to be kind of all singing, all dancing at the time. I don't, Michael, you may be too young for this, but there was something called ClearCase. I don't know if Terry and
Tara, I was in Rational Software.
Oh man. The revision control system, caching system that was so complicated you had to have a system administrator.
Yeah, well, you know what IBM did? They loved that so much they made it even more complicated and then called it Rational Team Concert.
Yeah. Oh God.
It's one of the, Yeah.
Yeah. All right, now that I've given us all the old folks PTSD, I think, you know, we're seeing everything cycles, right? We just keep coming back to the same challenges. It just maybe the details start to adjust. So a lot of what y'all were talking about was from the developer side. Great, that's what we're kind of here for. But I'm curious if there are any customer facing elements that pertain to this, like from an artifact management or runtime support operations management, that kind of come into play here. And I'm not trying to lead this in any particular direction, but I'm thinking about, you know, the DevOps spectrum, you know, if you're really dialed in, for example, using a cloud hosting solution, you know, you've got the ability to have a pipeline of production information that gets eventually sucked back into the dev space, right? So that you have improved time to resolve metrics, for example, right? So are the systems that we're talking about here, is there really that kind of sort of functional crossover between mainframe execution and non-mainframe execution, or is there a pretty, does there tend to be a pretty solid layer between those two things with maybe just like, you know, a proxy or API interface? Or
Yeah,
do the
really
mainframe
not-
stuff just really kind of be standalone?
Yeah, I'm really not sure where you're going with that. I think the one thing that did come to mind as you were talking about it is, for example, we're doing more work within Endeavor specifically to make some of the data and you know, the care and handling of packages and where those packages exist in the pipe, make that all more visible.
I'm sorry, when I mean customer facing, what I'm really talking about is sort of operational optimizations. So when the bits are actually running and you have ops or ops-like people or SREs, you know, are there things around Endeavor that facilitate that workflow? Because what we're talking about mostly is like SCM and coding and that kind of stuff, from what I've seen so far. Does that make sense?
I guess when
It makes
go ahead.
sense. I still go back to what I was starting to say though, which is to say that, you know, let's take an SRE scenario where, you know, you need to understand what version of a particular component is running, you know, and at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that pertains to the mainframe as well. And, you know, we have that capability in Endeavor. And what I was starting to say is we're doing a piece of work to make that even more visible, right?
Gotcha.
And to open up to scenarios where that data can be included in existing solutions or existing bespoke solutions even. Mike, were you trying to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that, you know, when we say like Endeavor is the SCM for mainframe, we're talking about also not just source control management, but software change management. So it includes seeing these changes as they go between environments. A lot of that today isn't these artifacts or changes moving between long-standing environments. That's typically how things have been done on the mainframe, but it's starting to move into the interest of, you know, like if we want to provision a new environment that looks similar to production and, you know, put the artifacts into that environment and test them before moving forward. Endeavor also, you know, includes strategies for those things as well. But like for like I don't know if that answers from the SRE perspective, but also when you were talking, I was thinking from the management perspective, and we're doing some work around, you know, we see sets of changes as they move across environments from the Endeavor perspective, and looking at visualizing those in terms of DORA metrics and things of that nature. So we're doing some work around that as well.
Which was my very next question, which is, you know, going back to where Terry is probably about to drag us, which is, you know, exposing the business value through metrics driven, you know, assessments on, are we improving our velocity quality, you know, that type of stuff. So it sounds like that's an element of it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us to keep cycling up and down this hierarchy of needs, because
hopefully without starving the monkey.
Yeah, we you know, we often see people focusing just on the engineering piece and then wondering why they're struggling with actual adoption and customers. And it's because if you're only at the engineering level, you can only sell that to people who already have bought into the concepts. And so you're back to this cultural problem again. And so we try and encourage people to think about this from a commercial perspective. You know, what's the business value of this? How do you quantify that? How does this improve your ability in general to quantify the business value of the assets that you're producing, and be able to make that argument and that pitch so that you can really get the message to the audience that's paying for this stuff. Because I mean, you know, part of the reason why these techniques are so popular in cloud and Kubernetes space is because any developer can easily spin up a container and start demonstrating stuff. But it's a lot harder for a single engineer to go and buy a mainframe and show it working. So the people who are paying in your field are a very different audience to most of the audiences that continuous delivery is focused on today. And that's something that we definitely want to continue to put effort into, because, you know, we believe that really continuous delivery is almost saturated in terms of adopters. You know, there's lots of people doing it, but if you want to grow the continuous delivery space, now you're going to have to evangelize to people who come from a completely different commercial culture and take them on the journey from day one, where something like a dependency on mainframe might be seen as a blocker to that adoption, whereas actually we can show, well,
I can take that
integrates.
mainframe and turn it into 50 microservices.
Hey, Terry, has John Murtick talked to you at all about the work that he's doing to bring a mainframe online and make it available to use cases like you're describing? In other words, lower the barrier to entry for those.
Sandbox.
That would be very interesting.
Experiment. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to figure out, you know, technically how to make that happen, and, you know, what does it look like? What, you know, how do we integrate it and such? But that may be a conversation we want to explore as we start bringing that box online.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'll say this is not a special case. What you're experiencing is not only the norm today, but actually, from my position, I also sit on the IRDS roadmap. So I get to be involved in a lot of the architecture discussions about what's coming at a semiconductor level over the next 10 years. And believe me, we're facing a Cambrian explosion of new architectures that are about to hit us. So we're not going into a future where everything is Kubernetes running in the cloud in a homogeneous way. We're heading into a future where there's this explosion of dedicated architectures with specialist silicon to solve individual problems. And there'll be billions of these devices sitting at the edge. And so this is a great first example of a repeating pattern that's going to challenge everybody in the continuous delivery space, which is, how do we get this methodology to span all these disparate architectures and technologies?
Right. In a scalable way with visibility.
Yep.
No problem.
Yeah. We've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So it would
One snowflake at a time.
Yeah. Definitely be great to get some content about this mainframe perspective into the repository. So, you know, we're starting to show how you can look at this from a different perspective, but make it all work in an overarching way.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna do some callbacks in the docs.
I feel, Terry, I feel like just real quick, I feel like the methodology and the point of view that we have with respect to mainframe in this domain aligns with your point of view. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think this has been a very productive discussion, and I think we're definitely talking about the same things and the same challenges. It would be really nice to get some sort of white paper that we could put up on the site and include in our discussions as a starting point, if you like. So, you know, that would not need to be technology agnostic. So you could discuss the approaches that you've been taking with your technologies in your problem space, and use that as a jumping off point. But then, you know, I think we're also open to broadening the narrative in the wider document to be more inclusive of, you know, how do you address diverse environments, and, you know, why these are actually important, and that the diversity of the environment is what gives you your competitive edge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I was actually
point
sorry. Yeah, please go ahead. One clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out just a little bit about our experience with trying to port, because Peter talked about OpenShift before. So OneShare is like a direct competition to OpenShift, and we got a couple of customers who were asking for OneShare to be availability on OneShare support on mainframe. So that's why we started the project to port OneShare on S390X, and we didn't face a lot of challenges. The main challenge we faced was our CI/CD system didn't support S390X, so we had to hack our way around it to be able to integrate to work with that CD system. But after we got that working, our port systems have been working ever since with our S390X VMs without any issues. So just wanted to.
What was the name of that solution? I couldn't quite catch that. Or maybe you could type it in the chat.
Yeah, Rancher on Z.
It's called Rancher, Tara.
Oh, Rancher. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm still drinking my coffee.
We're just heading to the top of the hour. So, Fatih, did you want to?
Yeah, it was actually what you just said, Terry. The white paper idea, maybe it would make sense to have this work on a white paper together, like CDF Open Mainframe projects, to, you know, elaborate the idea a bit further, evangelize the idea, and pass the word, you know, call people for action, saying this discussion is happening, it's time to join now, here is where you can find us. So we can, both CDF and Open Mainframe could promote this further to bring more people to this discussion, so we can contribute these things back to best practice website and elsewhere, if it makes sense, just as an idea, as a concrete next step.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to have a read of the best practices site if you haven't already, and then we try and encourage people, if they're going to add content, to use the definitions of some of the terminology that we're building on within that repository, because, you know, we've spent many years arguing over the meaning of certain terms, and sometimes that can lead to a huge amount of confusion. So it's important that we try and standardize as much as possible in that space. You're more than welcome to start drafting some content and submit PRs to our repository, or if you prefer, we can have a more formal discussion about how to proceed and how to write this stuff up. But we're very easygoing and open to input from everybody. So, you know, feel free to move this forwards if you think you have some content that would be relevant at this stage.
Do we want to just make the next session a working session to maybe do some outlining?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest as well.
Yeah, why don't we do that? I think that would be awesome.
Sure.
Right. Then we
Yeah.
could parcel out the authorship. You know, but maybe that's another next step after we get the outline.
Sounds good.
All right, very cool.
All right. Well, Fatih, thank you for bringing us together. It was great to meet y'all.
Yeah,
And
same here. Appreciate
see
you.
we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Very
Sounds
much.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a nice
everyone.
day. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.